Don't force anything, and everything will come in its time. Buddhist teachings, life in its natural unfolding, often teaches us the value of patience, the virtue of waiting, and the wisdom that comes when we allow events to follow their own course, rather than forcing them into existence. Buddhism, with its profound teachings on impermanence, non-attachment, and the nature of suffering, has long reminded seekers that peace is not found in control, but in surrender. To force something before its time is like trying to open a flower bud with your fingers. You only end up damaging its delicate petals. But if you trust the process, if you allow the sun, the rain, and the soil to do their part, that same bud will one day blossom in perfection. The principle behind "don't force anything and everything will come in its time" is not about laziness, resignation, or passive inaction. Rather, it is about cultivating inner awareness and aligning ourselves with the natural rhythms of existence. It is about recognizing that every being, every event, every opportunity has its moment of maturation, just as winter cannot be rushed into spring and dawn cannot be hurried by human will. The unfolding of our own lives has a rhythm that surpasses our impatience. In this exploration, we will dive deeply into 5 key aspects of this Buddhist principle. Each topic will unfold like a long meditation, weaving philosophy, practical guidance, and reflection. By the end, you will not only understand why forcing things brings suffering, but also how to cultivate the serene patience that allows life to bloom in its fullness. The nature of impermanence and why forcing brings suffering. From the very core of Buddhist philosophy lies the concept of anicca, impermanence. Everything in this world, our bodies, our emotions, our possessions, our relationships, is subject to change. Nothing remains the same. Everything flows like a river, constantly moving, shifting, and transforming. When we forget this truth, when we cling too tightly or try to push reality into shapes it is not ready to take, we sow the seeds of our own suffering. Forcing is, in essence, a denial of impermanence. Imagine someone who wants the cherry blossom to remain on the tree all year. They may try to freeze the season, to lock the flower in place, but the nature of the blossom is to bloom in spring, scatter in the wind, and fall gracefully to the earth. To force it otherwise would not only be futile but destructive. The same applies to our lives. When we demand results before they are ripe, we resist the natural flow and invite frustration, disappointment, and inner conflict. Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths illuminates this clearly. The first truth acknowledges the presence of suffering, dukkha. The second identifies craving and clinging, tanha, as the cause. Forcing is nothing more than craving disguised as urgency. We tell ourselves that we must have this promotion now, that this relationship must work exactly as we imagine, that our spiritual awakening must happen immediately. But the more we clutch, the more elusive the outcome becomes. Take the example of meditation itself. Many beginners come to the cushion with the intention of forcing silence into their minds. They command their thoughts to disappear. They demand stillness. They push against restlessness. But in doing so, they only create more agitation. The harder they try, the louder the thoughts become. The paradox of meditation is that peace arrives only when you stop trying to manufacture it. Instead, you observe, you let go, you rest in awareness. The silence then comes by itself, unforced in its own time. This truth extends far beyond the cushion. Consider the world of relationships. If we try to force love, we destroy its authenticity. True love cannot be demanded. It cannot be pulled out of someone's heart by sheer will. It arises naturally through connection, trust, and shared experience. If one clings too tightly, demanding affection, the relationship suffocates under the weight of expectation. But when love is allowed to breathe, when it is given the space to grow, it flourishes. The same principle governs ambition. A seed planted in the earth does not become a tree overnight. You cannot stand over it, demanding that it grow faster, nor can you tug at its tiny sprout in an attempt to make it taller. Growth has its rhythm. It requires soil, water, sunlight, and time. If you interfere with this natural process, you stunt the very life you hope to nurture. Likewise, your dreams and goals require patience. Forcing them ahead of time, whether by rushing into decisions, manipulating circumstances, or exhausting yourself in relentless effort, often leads to collapse. In Buddhism, this wisdom is encapsulated in the concept of Wu Wei, from Taoism, often overlapping with Buddhist thought in practice, which means non-forcing or effortless action. It does not mean laziness, but harmony with the flow of life. Just as water flows around rocks without resistance, so too can we learn to move with obstacles rather than against them. Forcing is the opposite. It is hammering against the stone, exhausting ourselves in resistance when the path forward lies in surrender. But why does forcing bring suffering? The answer lies in expectation. When we force something, we attach ourselves to a specific outcome. We imagine that life must unfold exactly as we desire, in the exact timeline we dictate. When reality does not comply, as it rarely does, we feel pain. Disappointment creeps in, bitterness arises, and we find ourselves at war with life itself. This war is unwinnable, for reality cannot be bent by human stubbornness. Peace comes only when we lay down our weapons and accept the present as it is. A clear example can be seen in the pursuit of wealth. Many people push themselves into endless work, sacrificing health, relationships, and peace of mind in the desperate chase for financial security or status. They believe that by forcing their careers forward, happiness will be guaranteed. But often, what they find instead is emptiness. The wealth may come, but the inner joy they sought slips further away. This is because joy cannot be forced. It arises naturally from inner contentment, from living in harmony with one's values, not from relentless external striving. Buddha's wisdom suggests that the antidote to this suffering is mindfulness. By becoming deeply aware of the present moment, we recognize that forcing is unnecessary. Everything we need is already here. The future will arrive in its own time, shaped by the seeds we plant today. If we act with clarity, compassion, and patience, those seeds will ripen into fruit, but the timing is beyond our control. Just as a farmer cannot dictate the exact day his crop will be ready, so too must we learn to trust life's seasons. Ultimately, forcing is rooted in fear. The fear that life will not give us what we need. The fear that if we do not push, nothing will happen. Buddhism teaches us to see through this illusion. The universe is not barren or hostile. It is abundant. The river of existence continues to flow, whether or not we fight against it. If we learn to float instead of thrash, we discover that the current is already carrying us where we need to go. In learning this, we take our first step toward freedom. By letting go of forcing, we let go of suffering. By accepting impermanence, we accept life's gifts as they arrive, without demanding that they come sooner or last longer than they should. This is the wisdom of patience. This is the liberation of trust. If you are finding value in these reflections, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming teachings and deep explorations of Buddhist wisdom, the wisdom of patience and the rhythm of life. Patience is perhaps one of the most misunderstood virtues in modern times. In a society that constantly glorifies speed, productivity, and instant gratification, patience often appears as weakness, as passivity, or as the luxury of those who have nothing better to do. Yet, within Buddhist wisdom, patience is not only a strength, but also a gateway to liberation. It is the very antidote to suffering because it aligns us with the reality of impermanence, with the flow of time, and with the natural unfolding of life. To say, don't force anything and everything will come in its time, is to say that the virtue of patience is not optional. It is essential for peace, for growth, and for awakening. When we reflect on the teachings of the Buddha, patience emerges again and again as a form of wisdom. In the Dhammapada, one of the most important collections of Buddhist verses, there are lines that state that patience is the highest form of ascetic practice. This is not by accident. To wait without agitation requires deep mastery of the mind. Anyone can shout, demand, or attempt to manipulate circumstances to suit their desires, but it takes true spiritual strength to remain calm in uncertainty, to trust in the unfolding of life without attempting to accelerate it. Patience is not simply about waiting for time to pass. It is not the passive endurance of boredom or the reluctant acceptance of delay. Rather, patience in the Buddhist sense is active awareness. It is the capacity to stay present in this very moment without allowing craving to drag us forward or aversion to push us away. To be patient is to be at peace with what is, without trying to bend it into what we wish it were. This form of patience transforms waiting into wisdom. Consider the metaphor of music. A song is not simply the sum of its notes played as quickly as possible. It is the rhythm, the timing, the pauses between the notes that create harmony. If a musician were to rush through every measure, forcing the melody forward without respect for its rhythm, the result would be chaos. In the same way, life has a rhythm. There are seasons of growth and seasons of rest, times of action and times of stillness. Patience allows us to recognize that every pause, every silence, every delay is part of the symphony. Forcing only creates disharmony, but patience preserves the beauty of the whole. One of the profound aspects of patience is that it teaches us humility. We are not the masters of time. No matter how advanced our technology, no matter how strong our will, we cannot force the sun to rise earlier, we cannot prevent the tide from retreating, and we cannot dictate when the rain will fall. When we try, we only discover the limits of our control. To accept this truth is humbling, but it is also liberating. It frees us from the exhausting illusion that we must manage every detail of life. Instead, we learn to cooperate with life's timing, to plant our seeds in the right season, and to allow nature to do its work. Patience also reveals itself in the way we deal with suffering. Imagine a person who experiences grief after the loss of a loved one. Society often tells them to move on quickly, to stay busy, or to get over it. But grief has its own rhythm. It cannot be forced to end by willpower alone. It comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes overwhelming. Patience allows the mourner to sit with their pain, to feel it fully without rushing to escape it. Over time, the sharpness softens, the storm calms, and healing arises naturally. If one tries to suppress or rush through grief, the wound only deepens, and the unprocessed pain resurfaces later in life. Thus, patience is not only a virtue but also a medicine for the heart. In the Buddhist path, patience is closely linked to compassion. When we practice patience with others, we learn to see beyond our own ego and expectations. Every person we encounter is on their own journey, moving at their own pace. Some are slow to understand, some are quick to anger, some are burdened by their past, and some are still awakening to their own nature. If we force others to change before they are ready, we cause harm. But if we meet them with patience, giving them the space to grow in their own time, we cultivate compassion. True compassion is not about fixing others. It is about being present with them as they unfold. Let us reflect on the natural world for further clarity. A caterpillar does not become a butterfly by force. It must pass through the cocoon, undergoing its silent transformation in darkness before it emerges in light. If you were to cut the cocoon open too soon, thinking you are helping, you would kill the butterfly before it has the strength to fly. In the same way, every soul must pass through its seasons of transformation. Forcing the process only delays the true flowering of potential. Patience is the recognition that transformation takes time and that time itself is sacred. The modern world conditions us to reject patience. With one click, we can access information that once took months of study. With fast food, we can eat in minutes what once required hours of preparation. With instant messaging, we can communicate across the globe in seconds. While these advancements have their benefits, they also create the illusion that life itself should operate at the same speed. We begin to expect that our growth, our healing, our relationships, and our dreams should also be instant. But the wisdom of patience tells us otherwise. The deepest transformations, the ones that truly matter, cannot be microwaved. They must be slow cooked in the fire of time. There is a Zen saying, "When walking, walk. When eating, eat." At first, this may sound simplistic, but the teaching reveals the essence of patience. To be fully present with one action without rushing to the next is to honor the rhythm of life. Patience is not waiting for the future to arrive. It is fully inhabiting the present without longing for it to be different. It is trusting that when the future does come, it will bring with it exactly what is needed. Patience also protects us from the poison of comparison. So often, impatience arises because we measure our progress against others. We see someone else achieve success, and we feel behind. We see someone else find love, and we feel abandoned. We see someone else at peace, and we feel restless. But comparison blinds us to the fact that every life unfolds at its own pace. A bamboo tree may spend 5 years growing invisible roots before it ever breaks through the soil, while other plants sprout within weeks. Yet, once it does, the bamboo shoots up rapidly, towering over everything. If we had judged the bamboo in its first years, we would have called it slow, unproductive, even a failure. But its hidden work beneath the surface was essential. In the same way, your life may seem delayed compared to others, but unseen roots may be strengthening you for a season of rapid growth. When we embrace patience, we free ourselves from the tyranny of should. The mind loves to dictate that things should be happening faster, that we should be further along, that life should give us what we want now. But patience loosens the grip of these illusions. It teaches us to say, "This moment is enough. What is meant for me will come when the time is right." This does not mean abandoning effort. We still plant seeds, we still act with intention, we still cultivate the conditions for growth. But we release the compulsion to control the timeline. This balance, effort without forcing, action without clinging, is the heart of the Buddhist path. A beautiful example of patience can be found in the story of the Bodhisattva. In Mahayana Buddhism, a bodhisattva is one who has attained the wisdom and compassion necessary for enlightenment, but chooses to remain in the world to help all beings awaken. The bodhisattva embodies infinite patience, for they do not demand immediate results. They are willing to wait countless lifetimes, to walk beside beings in their ignorance, to offer compassion again and again, without expectation of quick change. This patience is rooted in deep trust, trust that awakening will come when the conditions are right, trust that no act of compassion is wasted, trust that time itself is a teacher. Patience is also essential in our relationship with ourselves. Many spiritual seekers fall into the trap of self-criticism, believing that they should be more enlightened, more disciplined, more compassionate, more free of desire. They force themselves into rigid practices, condemning every failure and demanding immediate perfection. But the path of awakening is gradual. Even the Buddha spent years searching, practicing, and learning before attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. To be patient with oneself is to recognize that growth is not linear, that setbacks are part of the journey, and that awakening ripens slowly, like fruit on a tree. To force oneself into perfection is to miss the very compassion that Buddhism teaches us to embody. The wisdom of patience extends even into the way we breathe. Breath itself is a teacher of rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. If we try to force the breath, we create strain. But if we allow it to flow naturally, without interference, it becomes smooth, effortless, and nourishing. Life is the same. To live in patience is to breathe with existence, to synchronize with its flow, to trust its pauses as much as its movements. This rhythm of life is not random, it is profound. The seasons show us the wisdom of patience. In winter, the earth appears barren, lifeless, but beneath the surface, seeds are gathering strength. In spring, life bursts forth with energy. In summer, it matures in fullness, and in autumn, it lets go in preparation for renewal. If we judged winter as failure, we would miss its necessity. Without winter, spring could not bloom. Likewise, the seasons of our own lives have meaning. Times of waiting, of stillness, of seeming emptiness are not wasted. They are the winter that prepares us for spring. Ultimately, the wisdom of patience teaches us to trust. Trust is the soil in which patience grows. Without trust, waiting becomes torture. But with trust, waiting becomes peace. To trust is to know that the universe is not against you, that the timing of your life is not broken, that every delay carries hidden wisdom. It is to know that when the fruit is ripe, it will fall effortlessly from the tree. You do not need to shake the branches in desperation. You only need to be present to receive it. In this way, patience is not merely about waiting for life to deliver what you desire. It is about transforming desire itself. When you are patient, you no longer live in constant anticipation of the future. You live fully in the now, and in doing so you discover that the present contains its own richness. Ironically, when you stop forcing the future to arrive, you realize that everything you need has already been given. And so, the wisdom of patience is not a burden, but a liberation. It is freedom from the restless craving that drives so much of human suffering. It is the discovery that life's rhythm is already perfect, that your journey is unfolding exactly as it should, and that there is profound peace in letting go of control. If this reflection has resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you can continue to receive these deep teachings and walk further on the path of Buddhist wisdom. Letting go of control and trusting the flow control is one of the strongest illusions the human mind clings to. From the moment we are born, we begin to grasp at life, to cling to security, to demand certainty. We believe that if we can manage every detail, if we can manipulate every circumstance, if we can bend life to our will, then we will be safe, happy, and fulfilled. Yet this illusion of control is the very cause of much of our suffering. Forcing, as we explored earlier, is the attempt to control what cannot be controlled. It's the attempt to dictate the rhythm of time, to demand results from the universe, to push the river rather than flow with it. Buddhism calls us to awaken from this illusion and to recognize that freedom lies not in control, but in surrender. To understand why letting go of control is essential, we must first examine the nature of control itself. Control is rooted in fear. We attempt to control because we fear uncertainty, we fear disappointment, we fear the collapse of our plans, and ultimately, we fear impermanence and death. The ego whispers to us that if we can just tighten our grip, if we can just hold everything together, then we can escape the truth of change. But the reality is that life is beyond our control. The weather shifts without our permission. People leave without our consent, the body ages despite our protests, and death arrives whether we are ready or not. Control is not only impossible, it is an exhausting attempt to resist reality itself. Buddhism teaches that clinging leads to suffering. When we cling to control, we inevitably suffer, because reality refuses to bend to our will. This is why letting go of control is an act of wisdom. It is not a reckless abandonment of responsibility, nor is it a denial of effort. Rather, it is the recognition that life cannot be micromanaged into perfection. We can plant seeds, we can act with intention, we can prepare the soil of our lives, but we cannot force the harvest to arrive on our schedule. Letting go of control means trusting that once we have done our part, the universe will do the rest. A river is often used as a metaphor for life in both Buddhist and Taoist teachings. The river flows according to its own nature. It winds, it bends, it speeds up, it slows down, it carves valleys, and it nourishes life along its banks. If we enter the river and try to force it to flow in a straight line, we exhaust ourselves in futility. But if we learn to swim with its current, we find that it carries us effortlessly forward. Control is like thrashing against the current. Surrender is like floating. Both are movements in the river, but only one brings peace. One of the most powerful lessons of Buddhism is that suffering arises not from reality itself, but from our resistance to reality. The Buddha taught that desire and aversion, our grasping for what we want and our rejection of what we don't, are the roots of suffering. Control is the expression of both. We try to grasp and hold on to what pleases us, and we try to push away and avoid what displeases us. But reality is not subject to our demands. The seasons change, people change, circumstances change. When we let go of control, we let go of this exhausting battle. We begin to live in harmony with what is, rather than in constant war against it. Trusting the flow of life does not mean that we stop acting, stop working, or stop caring. It means that we align our actions with wisdom rather than fear. For example, consider the farmer once again. The farmer tills the soil, plants the seeds, waters the field, and protects it from pests. These actions are necessary, but once the seeds are planted, the farmer must trust the earth, the sun, and the rain. No amount of anxiety or forcing will make the plants grow faster. In fact, if the farmer tried to control every aspect, pulling at the stems, overwatering, or attempting to manipulate the process, the crop would be ruined. The farmer does their part and then trusts the flow of nature. In the same way, we must act with effort, but let go of control, knowing that the outcome is beyond our power. The human need for control is perhaps most evident in our relationships. We often try to control others, how they behave, what they feel, how they respond to us. But love that is forced is not love at all. To try to control another person is to deny their freedom, to suffocate their individuality, and to impose our own expectations upon them. This always leads to disappointment. People cannot be molded to our desires. They are beings with their own paths, their own timing, their own lessons. Trusting the flow of life in relationships means allowing others to be who they are, and loving them without trying to reshape them into our image of what they should be. It means letting go of control and embracing acceptance. Control is also closely linked to anxiety. Anxiety arises when we attempt to predict or manage every possible outcome, when we live in constant fear of what might go wrong. The mind races ahead, constructing endless scenarios, each one demanding control. But life cannot be contained within the narrow walls of our imagination. By letting go of control, we loosen anxiety's grip. We accept that uncertainty is not an enemy, but a teacher. The unknown is not something to fear, but something to trust. Every day, life has carried us through uncertainties we once dreaded, and every day we are still here. To trust the flow is to recognize that the same will continue. Letting go of control also requires surrendering the illusion of perfection. We often try to control life because we believe it must conform to our ideal vision. We imagine the perfect career, the perfect partner, the perfect future, and then we attempt to force reality into that mold. But perfection is an illusion. Life is not meant to be flawless. It is meant to be authentic. The cracks, the delays, the detours, these are not failures, but essential parts of the path. When we release control, we release the need for perfection, and in doing so, we discover the beauty of imperfection. We see that the broken vase still holds flowers, that the scar adds depth to the skin, that the mistake becomes a lesson. Buddhism also teaches us that control is deeply connected to the ego. The ego wants to believe it is the center of the universe, the commander of destiny, the master of time. But the ego is an illusion. When we let go of control, we also loosen the grip of the ego. We recognize that we are part of something larger, a vast interdependent web of life. We are not separate beings dictating terms to existence. We are waves in the ocean, rising and falling with the tide. To trust the flow is to recognize that the ocean itself is guiding us, that we are carried by a force greater than our small selves. Meditation provides a practical way to experience this truth. When we sit in silence, the mind often tries to control the experience. It wants to direct the breath, silence the thoughts, manage the sensations. But the more we try to control, the more restless we become. True meditation begins when we stop trying to control the mind and simply observe it. Thoughts come, thoughts go. Emotions rise, emotions fall. The breath flows in, the breath flows out. In this observation without control, we discover peace. This is the essence of trusting the flow, not intervening, not forcing, but witnessing life as it is. Control also manifests in our attempts to plan every detail of the future. We write schedules, we construct goals, we design strategies, believing that if we just plan enough, we can eliminate uncertainty. But how often do our plans unfold exactly as imagined? Rarely, if ever. Life intervenes, circumstances shift, and unexpected events alter our course. This does not mean that planning is useless, but that clinging to plans is. Wisdom lies in flexibility. We make plans, but we remain open to change. We set intentions, but we do not demand outcomes. This balance is letting go of control while still acting with clarity. Perhaps one of the deepest aspects of surrender is the recognition that even our suffering has a purpose. We often try to control life to avoid pain, but pain is an inevitable part of existence. To resist it is to multiply it. To control is to say, "This should not be happening." To surrender is to say, "This is happening, and I will meet it with awareness." When we trust the flow, we see that even suffering carries wisdom, that even challenges are teachers. Control resists the lesson. Surrender receives it. Trusting the flow requires faith, but not blind faith. It is not the faith that denies reality, but the faith that sees reality clearly and accepts it fully. It is the faith that life, in its vastness, knows what it is doing, even when we do not. It is the faith that every season has a purpose, every delay has a reason, every path has a destination, even if it is hidden from us. This faith is not naive. It is grounded in the lived experience that forcing brings suffering, while surrender brings peace. Letting go of control is not a single act. It is a practice. Day by day, moment by moment, we loosen our grip. We catch ourselves forcing and we release. We notice our anxiety and we breathe. We see our attempts to manipulate others and we step back into acceptance. Over time, this practice becomes natural. We begin to trust not because we have forced ourselves to trust, but because we have experienced the peace that comes with it. Trust grows like a tree, slowly, silently, but surely, until its roots anchor us in serenity. When we let go of control, we also rediscover joy. Control is heavy. It burdens us with endless responsibility for outcomes we cannot guarantee. Surrender is light. It frees us to live in the present. When we trust the flow, we laugh more easily, love more freely, and live more fully. We discover that joy is not in achieving the perfect future, but in being alive right now. This is why Buddhism insists that non-attachment is the path to liberation. To let go of control is to let go of attachment to specific outcomes, to specific timelines, to specific illusions. In that release, we awaken to freedom. We realize that the river of life is not our enemy but our guide, that the flow is carrying us not to destruction but to truth. To force is to drown, to trust is to float. And in floating we find that the river knows its destination better than we ever could. Letting go of control and trusting the flow is not easy. It requires courage to release the illusion of certainty. It requires humility to accept that we are not the masters of destiny. It requires faith to believe that the universe is unfolding as it should. but the reward is profound peace, the kind of peace that no amount of control could ever deliver. For in surrender, we finally discover the freedom we have been chasing all along. If this teaching has touched you and you wish to continue exploring the profound wisdom of Buddhism, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that you do not miss the next reflections and lessons that can transform your understanding of life. The power of non-attachment and inner freedom. Non-attachment lies at the very heart of Buddhist wisdom. It is not merely an idea, but a transformative way of being, a path that frees the human mind from the chains of suffering and opens the door to profound peace. To say, "Don't force anything and everything will come in its time," is to speak directly of non-attachment, because forcing is born from clinging to results, clinging to people, clinging to desires, clinging to illusions of permanence. Non-attachment does not mean indifference, coldness, or rejection of life. Rather, it means engaging with life fully while refusing to become enslaved by it. It means loving without clinging, working without obsession, living without fear of loss. This is where true freedom resides. The Buddha's insight into non-attachment begins with the recognition of impermanence. All things arise, exist for a while, and pass away. Nothing is permanent, not our possessions, not our relationships, not our achievements, not even our bodies. When we attach ourselves to what is transient, we create suffering, because the nature of the transient is to change, and we resist that change. To let go of attachment is not to stop caring, but to stop demanding permanence from what is impermanent. It is to see reality clearly, without the distortion of craving. One of the most common misconceptions about non-attachment is that it means giving up joy, beauty, or love. But in reality, the opposite is true. Attachment narrows our joy because it makes our happiness dependent on fragile conditions. We say, "I will be happy only if this person stays with me," or "I will be fulfilled only if I achieve this goal," or "I will be at peace only if life unfolds exactly as I wish." These conditions are unstable, and so our happiness is unstable. Non-attachment, on the other hand, frees us to experience joy in every moment without clinging to its continuation. When we no longer demand that joy be permanent, we can savor it more deeply while it lasts. Take the example of a beautiful sunset. If we are attached, we may feel sadness as soon as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, clinging to the wish that it stay longer. We may even take dozens of photographs, trying to capture and freeze it, but in doing so, we miss the living moment itself. Non-attachment allows us to simply sit and watch, to marvel at the colors, to feel gratitude for the gift of this fleeting beauty. When the sun finally disappears, we smile, because we never demanded it stay longer than it could. This is freedom. In relationships, non-attachment is equally liberating. Attachment often disguises itself as love, but it is not love at all. Attachment says, "I need you to behave as I wish, to stay with me forever, to fulfill my needs." This is not love, it is possession. Love without attachment says, "I cherish you as you are, I wish you happiness, even if it does not always align with my desires. I allow you the freedom to grow in your own way." Attachment fears loss and suffocates the beloved. Non-attachment accepts impermanence and creates space for love to breathe. Ironically, relationships rooted in non-attachment often flourish more deeply because they are not burdened by fear and control. Non-attachment also transforms our relationship with suffering. When we are attached, we cling to pleasure and resist pain. We want the pleasant to last forever and the unpleasant to vanish immediately. But life does not obey these wishes. Pain arises as inevitably as pleasure. To be attached is to suffer doubly, for not only do we feel the pain itself, but we also feel the anguish of resisting it. Non-attachment accepts pain as part of existence. It does not seek it out, but it does not run from it either. It says, "This too is impermanent, this too will pass." In this acceptance, we find peace even in hardship. Work and ambition are also deeply affected by attachment. Many people strive endlessly, believing that their worth is tied to their achievements. They cling to status, recognition, and success, thinking that without these external markers they are nothing. But attachment to ambition is a trap. No matter how much we achieve, the mind always demands more. Satisfaction slips away as soon as the goal is reached. Non-attachment does not mean we stop striving or abandon our goals. It means we act with dedication while releasing our obsession with outcomes. We do our work because it is meaningful, because it is an expression of our being, not because we are clinging to the results. In this way, success or failure cannot shake our inner peace. Buddhism often illustrates non-attachment with the metaphor of holding a bird. If you hold the bird too tightly, you crush it. If you hold it too loosely, it may fly away before you are ready. But if you hold it gently, with openness, it rests in your hands. This is the essence of non-attachment. It is not about rejecting the bird, nor is it about clutching it in fear. It is about honoring its presence while allowing it freedom. This gentle balance applies to everything we hold in life: relationships, possessions, ambitions, even our own identities. Meditation is the direct practice of non-attachment. When thoughts arise in the mind, we are tempted to cling to them, to chase them, to identify with them. But in meditation, we learn to watch thoughts as clouds drifting through the sky. We do not cling to the pleasant thoughts or resist the unpleasant ones. We simply observe. Over time, this practice teaches us that we are not our thoughts, that we are not bound to cling to them, that freedom lies in letting them pass. This same attitude extends into daily life. When emotions arise, we no longer drown in them. We allow them to be, we observe, and we let them go. This is non-attachment in action. Non-attachment also reveals itself in how we approach possessions. Modern life often encourages attachment to material things. We are taught to equate happiness with what we own. We cling to our houses, our cars, our technology, believing that they define our worth. But possessions are impermanent. They break, they decay, they are lost. If our happiness depends on them, our happiness is fragile. Non-attachment allows us to enjoy possessions without being enslaved by them. We may use and appreciate what we have, but when it is gone, we do not despair, for our happiness was never tied to it. Perhaps one of the deepest areas where non-attachment brings freedom is in our sense of self. We are deeply attached to our identities, our roles, our stories. We cling to the idea that I am this kind of person, or my worth depends on being seen this way. But the self, as Buddhism teaches, is also impermanent. The I is not a fixed entity, but a flowing process of changing thoughts, emotions, and conditions. To cling to a rigid self-image is to suffer every time life challenges it. Non-attachment to the self allows us to be fluid, to adapt, to grow. It allows us to die to the old moment and be reborn in the new, again and again. One might ask, if we practice non-attachment, won't we lose all motivation? If we let go of outcomes, why would we act at all? The answer lies in the difference between clinging and engagement. Attachment says, I act only for the result. Non-attachment says, I act because it is right, because it is meaningful, because it expresses who I am. This shift transforms life. Work becomes joyful, relationships become freer, creativity becomes authentic, because we are no longer slaves to results. We still care, but we do not cling. This paradoxically leads to greater vitality, because fear of loss no longer poisons our actions. The power of non-attachment is also evident in how it reduces conflict. Much of human conflict arises from clinging to opinions, to ideologies, to desires. When two people are attached to being right, they argue endlessly. But when we loosen our attachment, we see that our opinions are not fixed truths, but perspectives. We can listen, we can adapt, we can let go of the need to dominate. Non-attachment cultivates humility and harmony. It allows us to engage in dialogue without hostility, to coexist peacefully despite differences. Non-attachment is not a rejection of passion or depth. In fact, it deepens them. When we love without attachment, we love more fully, because we are not clouded by fear of loss. When we work without attachment, we work more freely, because we are not chained by anxiety over results. When we live without attachment, we live more vividly, because we are not distracted by the endless struggle to make impermanent things permanent. Non-attachment is not emptiness in the sense of nothingness, it is fullness in the sense of freedom. Another way to understand non-attachment is through the concept of emptiness, shunyata. In Buddhism, emptiness does not mean that nothing exists. It means that things do not exist independently or permanently. They arise from conditions, they depend on countless causes, they change, and they pass away. To be attached is to forget this truth and to cling as if things were fixed. To practice non-attachment is to live in harmony with emptiness, to see that nothing is truly ours to hold, and therefore to be free from the fear of losing. Consider again the teaching of the lotus flower. The lotus grows from muddy water, rising above the surface to bloom in beauty. It does not cling to the mud, nor does it resist it. It uses the mud as nourishment, but remains unstained by it. This is non-attachment. We live in the muddy waters of impermanence, desire, and suffering, but we need not cling to them. We can rise above, blooming in freedom, untouched by what once bound us. Non-attachment does not happen overnight. It is a gradual practice, cultivated step by step. We begin by noticing our clinging, by seeing how often we say, "I need this to be happy," or "I cannot lose this." We practice loosening our grip. We let go of small things first, then larger ones. Over time, we discover that we can still love, still strive, still enjoy, but without chains. Each act of letting go brings a little more freedom, a little more peace. Ultimately, non-attachment is the path to liberation because it breaks the cycle of craving and suffering. When we are no longer controlled by our attachments, life becomes spacious. We are no longer terrified of change because we do not demand permanence. We are no longer obsessed with results because we do not cling to outcomes. We are no longer enslaved by fear because we accept the flow of existence. In this spaciousness, joy arises naturally. It is not the joy of possession or control, but the joy of freedom. This is why the Buddha called non-attachment the path to nirvana. Nirvana is not a distant heaven, but the extinguishing of craving, the blowing out of the fire of clinging. It is the peace that comes when we let go. In non-attachment, we discover that we are not diminished but expanded, not emptied but fulfilled. We discover that true freedom is not in holding on, but in letting go. If these words have brought clarity or peace to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that together we may continue walking the path of wisdom and discovering the profound teachings that free the mind and soul. Trust in timing and the path to inner peace. There is a profound truth hidden in the simple idea that everything comes in its own time. It is a truth that many struggle with, because the human mind wants everything to arrive now, to unfold immediately, to grant satisfaction without delay. But life, in its infinite wisdom, does not bend to our impatience. It unfolds according to rhythms and patterns beyond our comprehension. This is why Buddhism continually calls us to release the illusion of control, to loosen our grip on desires, and to embrace the trust that life's timing is never wrong. Trust in timing is not passive resignation. It is the active cultivation of peace in the present, knowing that what is meant to arrive will arrive, and what is meant to pass will pass, all in harmony with the deeper flow of existence. To live without trust in timing is to live in constant agitation. It is to believe that life owes us results at the exact moment we demand them, and when those results fail to appear, we drown in frustration. But the universe has no obligation to follow the deadlines we impose. When we recognize this, when we release our demand that life conform to our impatience, we begin to discover serenity. The teaching, "Don't force anything and everything will come in its time," is a direct antidote to the suffering created by this endless impatience. It reminds us that peace is not in rushing, but in aligning with the natural unfolding of life. We can see the importance of timing in every corner of the natural world. A seed planted in the soil cannot be forced to sprout before its season. The farmer may water it diligently, nurture it with care, and remove weeds. But if they demand that it grow in winter instead of spring, their demand will not alter reality. Similarly, a fruit ripens at its own pace. If plucked too early, it is sour and unready. If left too long, it rots on the branch. The wisdom lies in waiting for the right moment and in trusting that nature itself knows the rhythm. This natural timing is mirrored in our lives. Our relationships, careers, spiritual growth, and even our moments of awakening cannot be rushed. They ripen when the conditions are right and not a moment sooner. The Buddha often spoke of conditions. Nothing arises independently. Everything arises dependent upon causes and conditions. When the conditions are present, a thing comes into being. When the conditions are absent, it does not. This principle applies to every aspect of life. If we do not yet see the fruit of our labor, it may be because the conditions are not fully ripe. Forcing in such cases only leads to frustration. Trusting timing means recognizing that our role is to cultivate conditions with care, acting wisely, planting seeds, living mindfully, and then allowing the natural unfolding to occur when it is ready. Trusting timing also means releasing the obsession with comparing ourselves to others. So much of human suffering comes from the belief that we are behind, that others are ahead, that life has somehow cheated us by not giving us what it has given to others. But each person has their own rhythm, their own path, their own unfolding. A flower that blooms in spring does not envy the flower that blooms in summer, nor does it rush to compete. Each blooms when its time comes, and each brings beauty in its season. If we could see ourselves in this same way, we would discover immense peace. Instead of tormenting ourselves with comparisons, we would trust that our time too will come. Impatience is a form of mistrust. It says, "I do not believe life will provide. I must demand it now." Trust in timing, by contrast, is faith. It is the faith that life has carried us through every challenge we once thought impossible, and it will continue to carry us still. Think of the times in your own life when something did not happen as you wished, but later, with distance, you saw the wisdom of the delay. Perhaps you were spared from harm. Perhaps the delay gave you strength, skills, or clarity that you did not yet have. Perhaps it directed you toward a path you never would have chosen, but which became the foundation of your growth. Life has a way of weaving wisdom into its delays. Trust in timing is the recognition that even when we do not understand the delay, it has meaning. This trust requires surrender, but not the kind of surrender that abandons effort. Rather, it is the surrender that balances effort with acceptance. We still act, we still cultivate, we still live with intention. But we do not demand immediate results. We act with dedication, and then we let go. In this letting go, we create space for life to do its work. Peace arises not when everything happens according to our schedule, but when we stop clinging to our schedule altogether. The practice of mindfulness is essential for cultivating trust in timing. When we are mindful, we are present in the moment rather than lost in the future. Impatience drags us into the future, demanding that it arrive now. Mindfulness anchors us in the present, reminding us that this moment is enough. By training ourselves to be fully present, we weaken the grip of impatience. We begin to see that the journey itself is valuable, that every step is part of the path, and that waiting is not empty time, but full of lessons. Consider again the act of meditation. Many beginners sit in meditation with the goal of immediate enlightenment, immediate peace. They force themselves, they demand results, and when the results do not appear, they feel frustration. But meditation is not about reaching a future state. It is about being fully here. The peace they seek is not hidden in some distant moment. It is in this breath, in this awareness, in this very now. Trust in timing during meditation means letting go of the demand for immediate transformation and simply sitting with what is. Over time, the transformation unfolds naturally, without force. Trusting timing also affects how we relate to hardship. When we face suffering, our instinct is to demand that it end quickly. We want to rush through grief, skip over pain, leap past struggle. But suffering has its own timing. It arrives to teach us, to deepen us, to expand us. If we rush to escape, we miss the lesson. Trust in timing means allowing ourselves to move through hardship at the pace that is necessary, no faster, no slower. Healing has its rhythm, and peace comes when we accept that rhythm. Another dimension of trusting timing is recognizing that delays are not denials. When something does not happen immediately, we often assume it never will. We despair, we give up hope, we curse life for being unfair. But so often what seems like a denial is simply a delay, a preparation for something better, something more aligned with who we are becoming. The seed does not sprout the day after it is planted, but that does not mean it is dead. Beneath the soil, invisible to the eye, it is preparing. In the same way, unseen forces may be working in our lives, preparing conditions, aligning circumstances, strengthening us inwardly. Trust in timing means remembering that just because we cannot see movement does not mean nothing is happening. Buddhism also teaches the law of karma, that our actions create results, though the timing of those results is beyond our control. Sometimes the fruits of our actions ripen quickly, other times they take years or even lifetimes. To trust timing is to trust karma, to know that no action of kindness, no act of wisdom, no step of compassion is ever wasted. Even if we do not see the results immediately, they are unfolding in ways we cannot perceive. This trust allows us to continue walking the path of virtue without demanding instant rewards. Trust in timing also transforms our relationship with death. Death is the ultimate reminder that life is not under our control. It comes when it comes, often without warning, often without our consent. To fear death is to cling to control, to demand permanence where there is none. To trust timing is to recognize that death, too, has its place in the rhythm of existence. It is not an interruption but a continuation, a transition into another form. When we accept this, we release much of our fear. We see that just as birth had its time, so too does death, and in between, life is meant to be lived with awareness and peace. In the practice of trust, gratitude plays a vital role. Gratitude shifts our focus from what has not yet arrived to what is already here. When we are grateful, we see that life has already given us countless gifts: breath, health, food, relationships, moments of joy. We stop demanding that life give us more now, and instead we appreciate what has been given. Gratitude naturally cultivates trust, because it reminds us that life has been generous before and will continue to be. Gratitude says, if life has provided so much already, I can trust it will provide again in its time. The path to inner peace is paved with trust. Without trust, we live in constant tension, pulling life forward, pushing against its pace, demanding outcomes. With trust, we relax into the flow. We still walk, we still act, but our steps are lighter, our hearts calmer. We stop measuring ourselves against arbitrary timelines. We stop believing that we are late or behind. We realize that we are exactly where we need to be. Peace comes when we accept that this moment is enough and that the next moment will arrive when it is meant to. Trust in timing is not easy because it requires us to confront our deepest fears. Fear of missing out, fear of failure, fear of loss. But on the other side of these fears is freedom. When we trust timing, we realize there is nothing to miss, because what is meant for us will not pass us by. There is no failure, only lessons. There is no true loss, only transformation. Trust transforms fear into peace, impatience into patience, suffering into wisdom. This is why the great teachers of Buddhism emphasize trust as a cornerstone of practice. Trust in the Dharma, trust in the path, trust in the process. They remind us that awakening does not happen all at once, but gradually, as we walk with mindfulness and patience. If we demand instant enlightenment, we only create frustration. But if we trust the path, step by step, the awakening unfolds naturally. This same principle applies to every aspect of life. Trust the path, trust the timing, and peace will follow. To live with trust in timing is to live in harmony with the universe. It is to say, I will act with wisdom, I will plant seeds of kindness, I will walk the path of awareness, and then I will trust life to bring the harvest in its time. It is to see that forcing is unnecessary, because what is meant to arrive will arrive, and what is not meant will pass. It is to live with open hands instead of clenched fists, to breathe instead of grasp, to flow instead of force. In this way, trust in timing is not only a philosophy, but a way of liberation. It frees the mind, softens the heart, and brings us into alignment with the deepest truths of existence. And so, the final step in this journey of reflection is simple yet profound. Let go. Let go of the frantic need to control. Let go of the endless comparisons. Let go of the fear that life is not unfolding as it should. Instead, trust. Trust that every moment has its place, every season its purpose, every delay its lesson. Trust that the rhythm of life is wiser than your impatience. Trust that peace is found not in forcing, but in surrendering to the flow. In this trust, you will discover the inner peace that cannot be shaken by the storms of time. If these words have touched you, and you wish to continue receiving profound reflections that bring clarity and peace, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel so that together we may keep walking this path of wisdom and awakening.